The receipt printer spat out a list of items I hadn't sold, all dated tomorrow. It happened sometime after 2 a.m., when the store felt hollowed out by the night. The overhead lights hummed softly, a tired fluorescent buzz that never fully stopped, just wavered now and then like it might give up. The refrigerators along the back wall breathed in slow, uneven cycles, glass doors fogging faintly before clearing again. Outside, the highway whispered with distant traffic, cars passing too fast to matter, their sounds stretched thin by the dark. I was alone behind the counter, counting cigarettes for the third time because there was nothing else to do. That was when the receipt printer started. At first, it was just the familiar click, the tiny mechanical cough it always made when someone paid cash. My body reacted before my brain did. I reached for the receipt without looking, already forming the half-mumbled, "Have a good night," that lived permanently in my mouth. But there was no one there. The printer didn't stop. It chattered insistently, teeth gnawing at the roll of thermal paper, spitting out a white ribbon that curled onto the counter and slid toward the floor. The sound felt too loud in the empty store, each staccato snap echoing between aisles. I frowned and leaned closer. The smell of warm thermal paper rose immediately, sharp, plasticky, faintly sweet. It always reminded me of overheated dust. "Register glitch," I muttered, more for the sound of a voice than anything else. I tore the receipt free. The paper was still warm between my fingers. The timestamp caught my eye first. 3:17 a.m., October 19th. Tomorrow. I checked the clock on the register. 2:41. I checked my phone. Same. I checked the cheap wall clock above the beer cooler, its second hand jerking forward with visible effort. Still today. A chill crept up my arms, subtle but insistent, like the store's air conditioning had kicked on a degree too hard. I scanned the rest of the receipt, expecting nonsense. Error codes, blank lines. Instead, it was itemized, clean, precise. 2x coffee, large. 1x sandwich, turkey. 1x pain reliever. 1x bandage roll. Total, $14.62. I hadn't sold a coffee in over an hour. The sandwich warmer was off for the night, its interior dark and empty. The pain relievers were locked in a case behind me. No one had been close enough to the counter to trigger the register. I looked up, suddenly aware of how far the aisles stretched when they were empty, how the convex mirror in the corner reflected too much of the store at once, bending the world just enough to make it feel unreal. The printer clicked again. Another receipt slid free. Tomorrow, 3:18 a.m. This one was longer. The temperature dropped noticeably. I could feel it in my knuckles, the air pressing cold against my skin. The refrigerator's hum deepened, not louder, just lower, as if the pitch had shifted. I didn't tear this one right away. I watched it feed out, inch by inch, the paper trembling slightly as if something inside the machine hesitated before committing to each line. Flashlight, batteries, AA, gloves, work, trash bags, disinfectant spray. My stomach tightened. The aisles seemed darker somehow, shadows pooling beneath the shelves where the light didn't quite reach. The automatic doors at the front of the store stood closed and inert, their glass reflecting my own pale shape behind the counter. I checked the doors anyway. Locked. Solid. The night pressed its face against the glass but didn't push. "This isn't funny," I said, though there was no one to hear it. The printer answered with another burst of chatter. 3:19 a.m. Tomorrow. The list grew longer. Rope, duct tape, utility knife. I felt watched then, not in the vague, anxious way I'd felt on plenty of night shifts, but specifically, deliberately. As if the store itself had leaned closer, waiting to see if I understood. A faint draft brushed my ankles. I looked down. The floor near the counter was colder. The tiles darkened slightly, like they'd absorbed moisture. I hadn't spilled anything. The receipt slid off the counter and unfurled onto the floor, its edge touching my shoe. I bent and picked it up, hands shaking now. The thermal paper left faint gray smudges on my fingers, numbers ghosting there before fading. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I tried to cancel the transaction. The register beeped. Unhelpful. I tried to reboot it. The screen flickered, then returned to its idle glow, cheerful and blank. The printer started again. This time, the sound was different. Slower. More deliberate, each click spaced carefully, like a breath being measured. 3:20 a.m. Tomorrow. Shovel. Bleach. Paper towels, extra absorbent. The smell in the store changed. The familiar blend of stale coffee and plastic packaging gave way to something metallic, sharp at the back of my throat. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. The refrigerators stuttered, lights inside them flickering in sequence down the line, as if something were passing behind the glass from one end to the other. I stepped back from the counter. The printer kept going. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I nearly dropped it, pulling it out. No signal. Just the screen lighting up, illuminating my reflection. Eyes too wide, face washed pale blue. Behind me, the convex mirror showed the aisles stretching farther than they should have. Shelves bending inward, converging toward the back storage door. The printer spat out another receipt. 3:21 a.m. Tomorrow. This one didn't list items. It listed times. 3:22, front door opens. 3:24, spill cleaned. 3:26, emergency services called. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. No, I said. That's not. The automatic doors slid open. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and exhaust. The bells above the entrance jingled softly. No one stood there. The doors stayed open. The printer clicked. 3:22 a.m. Tomorrow. Blood cleaner. Mop bucket. Wet floor sign. The floor near the counter darkened further. A spreading stain that reflected the overhead lights dully. The air felt heavy, pressing down on my shoulders. I haven't sold anything, I said, louder now, my voice cracking. You can't. This isn't. The store creaked, a long, low sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The convex mirror vibrated slightly, its image warping. The receipt printer screamed. Paper poured out in a continuous stream, the roll spinning wildly, the chatter blurring into a single mechanical shriek. I grabbed at it, trying to tear it free, but it kept feeding, burning hot against my hands. The timestamps jumped. 3:23, 3:24, 3:25. The items blurred together, overlapping, repeating. Bandages, more bandages. Pain reliever, pain reliever, pain reliever. I backed away, tripped over the edge of the fallen receipt, and hit the floor hard. The cold tile seeped through my uniform. From down here, the counter loomed impossibly tall. The printer perched atop it like a mouth that wouldn't close. The receipts slid off the counter and crept toward me, driven by nothing I could see. 3:26 a.m. Tomorrow. Time of death. 3:27. The lights flickered violently. Somewhere, glass shattered, one of the refrigerator doors, cracking from the inside. The hum cut out, plunging the store into a sudden, oppressive quiet broken only by the printer's frantic clicking. I scrambled backward, heart screaming, breath ragged. The timestamp changed one last time. 3:27 a.m. Today. The printer went silent. The automatic doors slid shut. The store exhaled, lights steadying, refrigerators humming back to life as if nothing had happened. The smell of thermal paper faded, replaced by the ordinary staleness of late-night retail. I lay there, shaking, listening to my own breathing. The register chimed softly. A completed transaction. I didn't look at the receipt. I didn't need to. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, right on schedule. The store's windows showed a different weather than outside. I had been working the night shift at the gas station for nearly 3 months, long enough to know the rhythm of the place. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was steady, low and unchanging, a background thrum that usually faded into the monotony of scanning items and ringing up customers. The air conditioning circulated a sterile chill that made the plastic of the candy wrappers and coffee lids almost cling to the fingers. The smell of stale coffee, ammonia from the restrooms, and faint gasoline from the pumps outside created a scent I had learned to ignore, like an old song playing softly on repeat. It was just past 1 a.m. when I first noticed the difference. The parking lot outside was soaked from an earlier rain, slick with reflections of the streetlights, and the air smelled clean and damp. I was wiping down the counter near the register when my gaze drifted to the windows. The glass showed something else entirely. A fine drizzle fell against the storefront, not heavy like the rain had been, but persistent and thin, threading down the glass in rivulets. The sky inside the reflection was a uniform, dark gray, low and oppressive, while outside it was clearing, moonlight glinting off the wet asphalt, stars already peeking through thinning clouds. I blinked, shook my head. Fluorescent lights can play tricks. Maybe it was the angle or the faint haze on the glass from condensation inside. But the drizzle persisted. I stepped closer, fingertips tracing the cool glass, and the smell hit me. A damp, earthy scent that didn't belong inside the station. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like wet soil after a summer rain. My stomach tightened. A low rumble came from somewhere overhead. The AC, I thought, but it wasn't steady. It vibrated in short pulses, like the building itself was breathing. I backed away and looked again. The windows didn't change. Outside, the air was crisp and still. Inside the glass, the rain fell without pattern, shadows twisting under the invisible wind. I rationalized. A reflection of traffic lights, headlights of a passing car, the old fluorescent flickering, anything to explain it. The store had been here for 20 years, old but solid. Nothing in the building could create this kind of illusion. I returned to restocking the shelves, trying to ignore it, but I kept glancing at the windows. Each time, the drizzle had thickened slightly, forming puddles along the sidewalk that didn't exist outside. The street beyond the pumps remained dry, illuminated by the yellow glow of sodium lamps. By 2 a.m., it was more than a drizzle. The rain had become sheets in the reflection, streaking across the asphalt at impossible angles, and the sky was almost black, void of stars. Yet when I dared to look over my shoulder through the front doors, the world was unchanged, street lamps flickering, a few distant cars, the faint scent of ozone from the damp air. The store felt smaller. The hum of the lights no longer comforted me. It pressed down, heavy and rhythmic, in sync with my own heartbeat. I noticed the reflections in the glass more clearly now. The rows of candy, the coffee machine, the shelves. All looked correct, but the rain outside the store and the reflection bent around them, warping their edges, elongating shadows. The distortion made the scene feel alive. I thought I saw movement, shapes shifting in the mirrored wetness, silhouettes crouching low, ducking between the pumps. My pulse leapt. I pressed my palms to the counter, knuckles whitening. When I turned toward the doors, nothing. The parking lot was empty. The night was calm. I told myself it was exhaustion. 12 hours of fluorescent light and background hum could do strange things. The reflection might be warped by condensation, the humidity in the air, a trick of perspective. But when I looked again, the weather had changed more. The drizzle became a thin fog, hugging the asphalt, curling up around the pumps. Inside the glass, droplets formed on the windshield of a car that wasn't there, streaking down slowly. The light from the street lamps warped inside the fog, bending unnaturally, refracting across surfaces as if the scene behind the glass were a separate reality. I stepped back. The chill from the reflection seeped into my fingers, cold enough to make the hairs on my arms rise. I could feel it, almost like an inhale, drawing toward me, the smell of wet asphalt, leaves, and something darker, like iron, like soil freshly turned. I leaned closer. The fog parted briefly, and I swear I saw a figure standing near the pumps, cloaked in the mist. It didn't move, didn't gesture, but it was tall, impossibly thin, its head angled toward the store. A second passed, or maybe minutes, and the fog closed again. When I turned to look outside for real, nothing. Just the empty lot, The clear sky, the soft residue of rain. Couldn't shake it. Every time I glanced at the glass, the reflection shifted. The weather morphed. Drizzle, fog, then a sudden gust of wind bending the reflections of streetlights into unnatural angles. Leaves swept in patterns that didn't exist outside. Shadows lengthened toward the doors, folding across the sidewalk as if they had weight. I checked the time. 2:43 a.m. My hands were shaking. I considered calling the night manager, my voice breaking the quiet of the store, but then I imagined what they'd say. It's just reflections. You're tired. But it wasn't tiredness. Something in the glass was deliberate, observant, patient, waiting. I tried to focus on tasks, stocking candy, checking dates on milk, wiping the counter. Each movement felt measured, as though the store was aware of every shift in my body, every twitch of my eyes. Every time I glanced at the window, the weather had become more impossible. A sudden downpour that didn't touch the asphalt outside, lightning flashing in the reflection while the real night sky remained calm, a thunderclap that was soundless. By 3 a.m., I was hyper-aware of every sound. The whir of the refrigerators, the faint buzz of fluorescent tubes, the distant hum of a truck passing. Every creak in the floor, every tap of a shelf against its bracket felt amplified, as if the building itself had tuned into me. I could no longer ignore the reflections. They moved independently, subtly. The fog sometimes lingered on one side of a pump, as if drawn toward me. Shadows pooled under imaginary awnings. And the figure, always on the edge, watching from behind the mist, closer each time I looked. I tried to step closer to the doors to see if I could interact, if the outside world might be real, if the glass could be disproven. But the reflection responded before I moved. The figure shifted in the fog, a deliberate, calculated adjustment. Its head tilted in recognition, as if it knew I was approaching. I stumbled back toward the counter. The air inside the store was thick, unnaturally humid, carrying the scent of wet stone and ozone. My pulse thundered in my ears. I couldn't leave. Not really. Not yet. The fog in the reflection thickened again, swirling like smoke in a windless room. The figure stepped closer, or I imagined it. But its movement synchronized with the slight, nearly imperceptible vibration in the floor beneath me, as if the store itself were an extension of that impossible weather, bending space to fit the reflection. I realized then that the reflection was not merely showing different weather. It was predicting, rehearsing me. The rain, the fog, the twisting shadows, they all centered on me, mirrored and warped, aware of my presence, waiting for me to react. By 3:17 a.m., I could no longer tell whether I was seeing outside or inside, reality or reflection. Every glance at the glass caused a subtle rearrangement. The shelves behind me seemed to bend slightly, the floor stretching toward the doors. The reflection mimicked my movements, but delayed, just enough to make my own reflection feel like a stranger. Then, the twist I had been dreading. The figure moved in the reflection while I stood still. Its head turned toward me fully, and I saw its face. Pale, elongated, almost featureless, but somehow smiling. The air pressed against my chest. My breath caught. I backed away, slipping on the floor's condensation I didn't feel before. My head collided with the counter. Dazed, I looked up at the window again. The figure was gone, the weather clearing. Outside, everything was calm. Street lamps, empty asphalt. Nothing. I wanted to run, but my feet felt heavier, slower. I realized the reflection was no longer on the glass. I was in it. When I reached toward the doors, the outside didn't respond. The glass behind me rippled like water. The drizzle I'd seen, the fog, the impossible wind, it began to fold inward. Shapes emerged from it, not reflections, but something else, moving with intent. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My hands pressed to the glass, but it yielded like liquid. I felt myself pulled forward, drawn into the storm that had never existed outside, a night rehearsed for me alone. And as my vision blurred, I realized. The store's windows had been showing me the weather of the place I was about to become, and the night outside had nothing to do with it. I didn't make it to dawn.